Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us for the Pennsylvania Policy Center's June State Policy Action Call. We know there are many demands on your time, and we appreciate you spending part of your afternoon with us. For those of you who may be new to these calls, my name is Felicity Williams, and I serve as the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Policy Center. We are a statewide, nonpartisan public policy research and advocacy organization dedicated to helping Pennsylvanians understand how policy decisions impact their daily lives and what we can do together to build a Commonwealth where everyone can thrive. Before we begin, I want to cover a few housekeeping items. Please continue to drop where you are joining us from across the Commonwealth in the chat. We love to see that. All attending microphones are muted to help minimize background noise and ensure everyone can clearly hear today's speakers. We do, however, want this to be an interactive conversation. Please use the Zoom chat throughout the program to share comments and submit questions. We'll be monitoring the chat and we'll reserve time for questions later in the program. If you experience technical difficulties, please let our team know in the chat and we will do our best to assist. Now let's turn to why we're here. Pennsylvania's constitutional budget deadline is June 30th. Yet here we are, less than 2 weeks away, and many of the biggest questions facing the Commonwealth remain unresolved. The House passed a budget proposal months ago. The Senate has not yet released its own proposal and will not return to session until next week. At the same time, the House has continued to advance legislation addressing some of the Commonwealth's most pressing challenges. Meanwhile, lawmakers continue to negotiate major questions about education funding, public transportation, workforce investments, economic development, health and human services, and how Pennsylvania will address ongoing fiscal challenges in the years ahead. These debates can sometimes feel abstract. We hear terms like appropriations, revenue estimates, structural deficits, reserve funds, and budget negotiations. But at the end of the day, budgets are about values. A budget is a statement of priorities. It reflects who and what we choose to invest in. It determines whether children have access to well-funded public schools, whether workers can earn wages that allow them to support their families, whether seniors can access services that help them age with dignity, whether people can get to work, school, medical appointments, and opportunities through reliable public transportation. In short, budgets shape the conditions under which people live their lives. And this year's budget debate comes at a particularly important moment, the ongoing affordability crisis, not only in this Commonwealth, but across the country. Families across Pennsylvania continue to struggle with the rising costs of housing, groceries, childcare, healthcare, transportation, and other basic necessities. Communities are confronting uncertainty around federal funding decisions. Public transit agencies are warning of significant service reductions without additional investment. School districts continue to grapple with the implications of Pennsylvania's school funding inequities. And workers across the Commonwealth are still waiting for action on a minimum wage that has remained stuck at $7.25 an hour for nearly 17 years. Just last week, I joined Senator Haywood, who's with us again today, and others as Senate Democratic leader Jay Costa filed a discharge petition to bring House Bill 2189, a proposal to raise Pennsylvania's minimum wage, to the Senate floor for consideration. The House has already acted. In fact, the House has passed minimum wage legislation multiple times over the years. Yet Pennsylvania workers are still waiting for the Senate to act. The decisions made over the next several weeks will have real consequences for millions of Pennsylvanians. And that's why this conversation today is so important. Our goal is not simply to talk about the budget process. Our goal is to help all of us better understand what is happening, what is at stake, and how advocates, community members, and organizations can engage during these final weeks of negotiations. We are fortunate to be joined today by an outstanding group of speakers who bring expertise from both inside the Capitol as well as from the front lines of advocacy on some of the most important issues before the General Assembly. I know that we were going to kick it off here with Chairman Harris, but given his role as chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, I know that he is locked in many discussions today, and so I'm not sure that he has been able to join us yet. Is that correct from my team here at PPC?
It does not appear that he is here.
He hasn't been able to join us yet. So we at PPC come with a plan knowing that it is budget negotiation season and with the desire to get a speaker like Chairman Harris, who has such a leadership role in those budget negotiations, we are flexible and have all of our plans in place to move forward first with Senator Art Haywood, who will be joining us to talk about efforts to finally raise wages in Pennsylvania. And so, with that, Senator Harris, yes, Senator Haywood, I would like to go ahead and turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who's joining this important conversation. As has already been stated, the House has passed legislation to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour on multiple times, and it is in the Senate. Governor Shapiro has said he will sign the legislation. Again, the House has passed it. That leaves one chamber, the Senate, which is currently controlled by Republicans, to do it. Now, let me be more clear about what is at stake. Can we show the first slide, please? Now, it's not just gas, it's not just housing, it's not just electricity, but food is going up. The potatoes you can see here, I got the receipt, over $1. Onion, over $1. Apple, over $1. Cheese, almost $3. Banana, about 50 cents. This small package of food is over the current minimum wage of $7.25. This is a challenge that people are facing. How to pay for basic food given the costs are going up. Next slide, please. Now, it's not just $7.25. Next slide. Yes, sure. Our next slide shows a little package of $6 where you can get several items in addition to the banana, the potato, the onion, the apple, the cheese. It's a small snack pack. At Acme, this was the last one. People are relying on small snack packs and other groceries to make it because food is unaffordable. So when we say we need to raise the minimum wage, let me be crystal clear about what it is for. It is so that everybody under $15 an hour can get a raise. It's not just for those who are making 7.25, as you will hear from some of my colleagues. If you're making 11, 12, 13, 14, getting the minimum wage will help you when we get to 15. If you are supervising someone and you are making under 15, you're going to get a raise too because your supervisors always get more than the folks they supervise. Now, it's not just employees and folks who got to pay daily bills. If you are a business owner, would you rather have a shopper who earns $15,000 a year or $35,000 a year? Every business owner I know would rather have a shopper with more money in their pockets to spend. Raising the minimum wage to at least $15 an hour will be good for businesses as well. And we have a provision to make it even easier for small businesses with under 50 employees to make the transition. We have proposed a tax credit. That's right, a tax credit for small businesses with 50 employees or less to raise the minimum wage. It is connected. You will hear a bunch of lies being told about the impact of raising the minimum wage. The first lie is jobs will be lost. I only asked you to look to New Jersey. The minimum wage is over 16. I asked you to look at New York. I asked you to look at Maryland. I asked you to look at Delaware. These are all states that have minimum wage of at least $15 an hour. Have you seen any news reports about major job losses there? The only job losses I can anticipate is our people who work in 2 and 3 jobs now only having to work 1 job. The second lie that's often told is that people are going to lose a lot of benefits. Study after study has shown that raising minimum wage to at least $15 an hour is not going to cost people housing, food, health care, and other benefits. In fact, on health care, folks are losing assistance because the national government cut the support for tax credits to help pay for the health care. And the most recent report is 160,000 Pennsylvanians have lost health care, not because of any kind of potential minimum wage, but because the national government stripping support for health care assistance. And the last one I just heard is that child care and other social service agencies will not be able to afford $15 an hour. Do you know that the last time the minimum wage was raised in Pennsylvania, the state understood the cost would be higher and increased funding for these social service organizations in order to meet the minimum wage demand? Now, I know that there are some of my Republican colleagues who say there should be no minimum wage, just let businesses decide what happens. This is a fundamental mistake. So what I have encouraging people to do is sign on to my letter. And you can sign on to my letter, particularly organizations, by contacting my office at 215-242-8171. 215-242-8171. Let us know that you want to sign on. We can arrange to receive your logo. We already have a number of organizations that have already signed on so that we can help our Senate Republican colleagues realize that it is over time, it is past due to get at least a 15 an hour. Now, I know some people say 15 is not enough. I agree. But the enemy here is 7.25. Be glad to take any questions about anything that I've shared and hopefully get the support of all who are on this call and beyond to get the minimum wage to at least 15 an hour. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Haywood. Looking here, I think we may have Chairman Harris with us now. Okay, and I'll turn it back over to you, Felicity, for an introduction.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Chairman Harris, for joining us. We know that you are incredibly busy today, and we are grateful for the time that you are able to give to our group. Just as a bit of an introduction here for those of you all, Chairman Harris serves as chair of the Pennsylvania House Appropriations Committee, one of the most important positions in the budget process. In that role, he's helping lead negotiations on behalf of the House and is deeply involved in discussions about the Commonwealth's fiscal priorities and investments. We also know that he has been a longtime champion for working families and communities across Pennsylvania, and we're grateful again that he has taken time out of what we know is an incredibly busy day to join us. So please join me in welcoming Chairman Jordan Harris, and we will continue with our program after that and take questions at the end. Thank you so much. Over to you, Chairman.
Sure. Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. And thank you for having me. To my colleague, I see Senator Haywood. It's always good to see you, my friend. As said, I'm Jordan Harris. I serve my neighbors in South and Southwest Philadelphia, Point Breeze, Grays Ferry, parts of Graduate Hospital, parts of King Sessing, and I serve the Commonwealth as a majority chair of the House Appropriations Committee. Glad to be here. Sorry I'm late. I literally been moving since 8 this morning, so you got to forgive me. It's June. June is it's like the Super Bowl for us, and so it's just nonstop. But I'm glad to be here. I guess I'm being asked to give kind of an update on the budget. So as you know, back in February, Governor Shapiro gave his budget address to the General Assembly. Following that, the House and Senate Appropriations Committees held separate hearings with all of the different heads of the departments and agencies throughout the Commonwealth. Back in April, the Pennsylvania House sent over to the state Senate the governor's budget proposal, a budget of some $53 billion that included our third installment of adequacy funding for schools here in Pennsylvania. As you know, 2023, we had a Commonwealth Court ruling that said how we fund schools in Pennsylvania is unconstitutional. And so we have a 9-year plan on how to fully fund our schools. We've done 2 years of that plan. This budget would be the third year of that plan, and therefore we sent over a budget to the Senate that includes those dollars. That budget that we sent over also includes our costs for maintaining the health care that we have in Pennsylvania with regards to our Medicaid funding. That budget also includes our forward thinking of putting together $100 million fund in case there are delays and or reduction in our funding coming from the federal government. And so where we are now is we are having meetings. We've met, me and my leadership team in the House. We've met with the governor several times. We've met with our Senate colleagues. We've met with our different counterparts in the state Senate. And quite honestly, now we're going back and forth with different budget proposals to see what it is that the Republican-controlled state Senate can find the votes to do. But let us be very clear. We are not kicking people off of health care in Pennsylvania. We won't pass a budget that do that. We are not going to move forward with a budget that does not fund the third tranche of adequacy funding for our schools in the Commonwealth. And so we're not going to pass a budget that doesn't put things in place for working people and working Pennsylvanians. Over the last few years, we've cut taxes 7 times, whether that was through the Working Pennsylvanians tax credit, whether that was the expansion of the property tax rent rebate, or whether that was a child independent tax credit. And we're not turning our backs on all of those things that we been doing. And so that's a quick overview of kind of where we are. We got, I don't even know what today's date is, y'all. I ain't gonna lie. I know that June 30th is coming up soon. So we got until June 30th to try to get this thing done. I'll be going back to Harrisburg on Sunday. We'll be there all week so that we can continue to rock and roll on this budget and get it done before the June 30th deadline. Also, let me say we passed the budget early enough. Excuse me, we passed the budget early enough because last budget was 135 days late. And we also understand the significant financial strain that puts on school districts and that puts on nonprofits. And so we are moving laser beam fast, in my opinion, on trying to get this done. But we got to make sure it's the right budget for Pennsylvania. And if y'all want me to answer some questions, I'm here. So got some minutes. I'll rock out and answer some questions if you want.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Chairman Harris. And we have received a number of questions here in the chat specifically for you. I want to encourage all of our folks in the room. If there's a particular panelist you have a question for, please note that when you submit that. Let me start off with a question here from our friend Nancy out in Western Pennsylvania. Question for you, Chairman Harris. What is hanging it up?
Well, so the Republican-controlled state Senate. I mean, they have to tell us what they can get 26 votes for. And so, and here's the other thing. Not only did we pass the budget in April, which was the governor's budget proposal, we passed it with Republican votes as well. All of the Democrats voted for it. I think we had about 5 Republicans, maybe 6. Don't quote me on the number, but there were several Republicans that voted with us on the governor's budget. So we know that we have Republican support for the governor's budget that we sent over. The holdup is the state Senate. If I'm being real candid and honest with you, a big part of them is they come up with these arbitrary spend numbers that they just pull out of the sky. And it's crazy because it sounds like car dealership. It's like, instead of saying the car costs $40,000, they're going to say the car is $39.99. And somehow you're supposed to feel better about buying that car. Well, they kind of try to do that with us. The only difference is when you say, oh, we can't spend $53 billion, we can only spend $52,999. Well, those numbers are actual big numbers, and they represent a cut in the services that we need. For example, just our DHS budget, for us to do the same exact thing that we did last year, No increases, no nothing, just the same thing. It cost us $1.3 billion more than it did this year. So we got to take all of those things into account while we have a Republican controlled Senate who, wants to just be able to have a talking point of cutting what they call spending. We don't call it spending. It's really us investing in Pennsylvania. So that's really what's holding it up.
Thank you so much for that answer, Chairman Harris. Another question somewhat related to that from our friend Caitlin, who is an education policy advocate, says last year the challenges were SEPTA and adequacy funding for education. What points of contention might we come in contact with this year?
Yeah, so I mean, there's still folks who have concerns about adequacy, but that's just not something that we're going to do a budget without. The Commonwealth Court has ruled. We have a process that we agreed to over 9 years, and we're not going to turn our back on funding schools in a way that brings us in to constitutionality. So that for us, that's a non-starter. We will fund schools. The other parts to it, though, are the revenue pieces. In the budget, the governor suggested raising of the minimum wage, which Senator Haywood talked about, which we 100% fully support. We also have legalization of skill games, which kind of throws a wrinkle into it now because the Supreme Court has said that these games are slot machines and that therefore they have to be regulated. And the court has given us 120 days to do it. And so we now have that on the table, but our budget also included revenue for skill games. And then our budget included revenue for the legalization of adult use cannabis. So the Senate has to decide which of those revenue options they want to take so that we can fund the budget that they know also that we need.
Another question for you, Chairman Harris. The question here is kind of related to what can folks in this room do to help to advocate for the kind of budget that we need. Caitlin again says, I feel confident having a leader like Chairman Harris in Appropriations Committee, but what can we do to support your work, Chairman?
Yeah, look, if you live in a district where you have a Republican senator, or you have friends that live in a district where they have Republican senators, they need to be making phone calls to their senators to tell them to get this budget done and to tell them that you agree with the investment of these resources going to public education and the likes. You know, a lot of times, a lot of my colleagues get to go home and say, what they cut from the governor's budget, and they get to come home to kind of like a triumphant warrior's reception. But the truth is, when they're saying we got to cut this, cut this, cut this, you got to ask them not the dollar, but what actually service did you cut? It's cute to say we cut $1 billion out of the governor's proposed budget. Okay, what did that $1 billion represent? Did that $1 billion represent increase in funding to home care workers and those who take care of our most vulnerable? Does that $1 billion include a cut to special education funding for our schools? Does that $1 billion include money that could have gone to our hospitals, which we know many of them are struggling now because of what's happening at the federal level? When somebody comes and says, we cut this, we cut that, okay, all of those numbers, on the other side of those numbers are programs and people, and they have real life impact. So if you live in a Republican district, go out there and start talking to those members, but don't let them tell you what they're trying to, save money and this and this and this. Ask them, okay, by doing that, what aren't we actually funding?
Two really quick questions here that folks have about some of the more recent topics that have come up. One question is digital advertising tax. Where does that stand now in the Senate? And another question, where do skill games taxes stand?
Yeah, so we passed the digital piece out of the House. If it wasn't this week, it was last week. But all of these weeks are starting to run together. So I really can't tell you the difference, whether it was last week or the week before. But I can tell you we did it. All right, so we did pass that. Skill games, like I said, the court has made a decision. So That is the newest wrinkle in our budget discussion. And, we have always been in favor of regulating skill games. And so now we will just have to add to the negotiation what those regulations will look like. We got 120 days to get that done. And so that is very much a big part of the conversation now that the court has ruled on where they believe skill games are.
Thanks so much. Another question here, and this may be one also for Senator Haywood. And we do appreciate you taking the time. We know you are in demand this week, and so we really appreciate this. We'll take as many questions as we can get to. One from Art up in northwestern Pennsylvania. Can you detail any new housing initiatives which are desperately needed?
Yeah. So the governor did a housing action plan. Maybe that was March. $1 billion $1 billion in funding. I'm gonna be honest with you, it is not fully flushed out. That is a part of what we're doing now on how we would do it. I can tell you personally that I've met with several mayors across the Commonwealth, county commissioners as well. Housing is not just urban area issue. It is urban, rural, and suburban. One of the things that I know we're going to be looking at, and sometimes things happen in this budget. Sometimes it could be outside spending, if I'm being honest, because we're probably going to have to bond to do this. We got to look at how we help local governments deal with blight remediation. One of the things that has constantly come up is that before you could actually get to building of affordable housing, there's a large financial drain for folks who want to do that building because they have to first remediate the blight. So I know that in different parts of the Commonwealth, we're talking about what funding looks like to help with blight remediation. The second part is that we put together a plan for fair funding, fair being PHARE, which is over at PHFA. We use FAIR to actually build affordable housing throughout the Commonwealth. And we have agreed that we will shift taxes, that the transfer tax and all those things that typically on the general fund, shifting that to FAIR up to $100 million. And so that's something that increased funding will also help us with what we're trying to do in the affordable housing space. Now, I'm not going to say we are all the way there. I personally believe there's a lot more that we need to do in the affordable housing space, but it is definitely something that is top of mind to us.
Thanks so much, Chairman. Thanks so much, Chairman Harris. Senator Haywood, did you want to chime in there?
3 quick things. Number one, I was leading advocate for getting FAIR passed, and just last week, $95 million was sent out to communities across the Commonwealth to advance affordable housing. We're so glad we had so much support to get the $100 million. Number two, if you do not live with a Republican state senator and you are in a statewide organization, please ask your statewide organization to sign on to our letter. The more statewide organizations that have signed on, it lets know that there's support for raising the minimum wage. The third thing is Senate Republicans every year try to put the state in a straitjacket. It is a straitjacket of spending that Chairman Harris just outlined. They say you got this much to spend, and therefore you got to cram all the priorities into the straitjacket. This is something that I'm so glad House Democrats and the governor have resisted. But part of that straitjacket is the lack of money to pay for some of the things that our neighbors deserve. And so we got to look at getting rid of some of these many tax breaks that corporations and billionaires have. If we can get rid of some of these tax breaks that these folks have, we can pay for much of what we know we deserve.
Thank you so much, Senator Haywood, for being such a great champion for working people here in Pennsylvania. I'm looking at the time here. We have a couple more questions. I'm going to pose one more question here to Representative Harris and to Senator Haywood. Then we're going to talk a little bit about school funding in the budget. We're going to hear from Susan Spicka, the Executive Director of Education Voters of PA. And we're going to talk about public transportation, hearing from Connor Descheemaker from Transit for All PA. There may be some questions related to that. We do have some questions related to school funding. We'll get to those after we hear from our other guests. But for you, Chairman Harris, one of the questions here folks have, first there's a note from Tammy, our friend, that rural maternity care is in a desperate state and cuts are devastating. We need more maternity care facilities, especially in rural communities. And a question from Danielle, a little bit different topic, but on workforce development. What are we seeing in the budget for workforce development? And I'll give it to both of our legislators to answer either of those or both of those questions.
Yes, so the work of Representative Cephas, Mays, and Curry has been tremendous on maternal health and particularly Black maternal health. We put $7.5 million in a budget that we've carried over for the last couple budgets that has been met with federal dollars for maternal health. Last year, I think it was last year's budget, included the first ever line item directly talking about maternal health. And a lot of those funds have been going to hospitals with high medical assistant populations to help with their obstetrics departments, to help with either the development of an obstetrics department or the support of an obstetrics department. Obstetrics, the way people see it from I don't see it this way, but from a healthcare perspective, it's not a department that quote unquote makes money. And so it is one of those things that we as a government have to help heavily support. We know that there are many places in Pennsylvania where you might have to drive an hour, hour and a half to have a child. And that is just not acceptable, which is why there is now a maternity health line item in the state budget that we fund. In addition to that, one of the things that we're also doing is funding more programs that help deal and support our mothers after they have their children, dealing with postpartum depression and different health ailments that affect our moms after they have children. So there's resources in the budget to do that as well. Not saying that, it's the end all be all, but for the first time ever, we're actually naming what we need to address and fund it, and that is maternal health.
Thank you so much for that excellent question, Tammy, and for your fantastic answer, Chairman Harris. Senator Haywood, any thoughts about funding for workforce development in the budget?
So the governor has proposed a number of workforce development improvements that are subject to making it or not making it through the budget grinder. When I say the budget grinder, I mean there's a lot of legitimate, well-deserving activities that should be funded, but we go through the budget grinder and very few things come out of the grinder. Because we have Chairman Harris and the governor, we got a better chance of getting some of our priorities funded. But I can't say with confidence whether the workforce proposals will or will not be funded. So I don't want to give people the impression that it's all systems go, given that we're in the last weeks of a very challenging budget negotiations.
Thank you so much. We know that in a lot of these situations, we don't find out until the last minute what might actually make it and what doesn't make it. We appreciate you taking the time to answer these questions for us. We are going to hear now from Susan Spicka talking about school funding. If you can stick around for more questions later, I know there will be additional ones as well on school funding. But Susan, go ahead.
Hi there. Thank you. I am going to just share a couple slides because I think it makes it a little bit easier. So I'm Susan Spicka. I'm the Executive Director of Education Voters of Pennsylvania. We are a 3-person statewide organization that works to make sure that elected officials will support a pro-public education agenda. So just briefly, I think everybody here knows school funding was declared unconstitutional in 2023. In 2024, as Chairman Harris said, the legislature enacted into law adequacy targets, which actually say how much each school district should be spending in order to be able to provide students with the services that they need to be successful academically. So these adequacy targets that they identified totaled $4.8 billion. They are spread over 363 school districts. So that's the number of school districts that have gaps. These are rural, urban, and suburban, the tiniest districts to the largest district. It is a across the board problem in Pennsylvania. And thanks to the leadership of the House Democrats, we have really strong allies in the building who have made this a non-negotiable issue. And we have also found that there is strong bipartisan support for this. So I think there is a combination of like when you can get one caucus that just says, this is it, this is what we need to do to make Pennsylvania move forward. I think they are very effective in being able to pull in everybody because in fact, funding public schools is an enormous benefit to communities and to children across the Commonwealth. It is going to be the foundation of our economy moving forward. So we are just very grateful that the legislature is really taking steps toward filling this unconstitutional school funding gap that has left kids behind. And primarily children who are poor and children of color are the ones who've been the most deeply impacted by this gap. So the 2026-27 budget proposal includes a third installment of the adequacy supplement. So that would be $526 million that would be driven out to the school districts that have the gaps, and it varies. Every school district gets a different amount based on its need. There's an additional $6.4 million that would provide a $50,000 minimum allocation to school districts that do not have adequacy gaps. And doing this, investing in this way would maintain the 9-year timeline for filling the gap that Chairman Harris discussed. There's also a piece of this that is called the tax equity supplement. Part of the problem with funding, with our way we fund our schools in Pennsylvania is we are incredibly reliant on local property taxes to fund schools. And there are some school districts in Pennsylvania that are placing an enormous burden on the shoulders of their local taxpayers to fund their schools. So the tax equity supplement is designed to drive dollars to the school districts that have the highest local tax burdens on their local individual homeowners to be able to start to relieve that burden and make it just a better, it's better for communities when they don't have these extraordinarily high local property taxes in terms of economic development and many other things. I did see a comment in the chat about the basic and special education funding levels being not quite what we had hoped for. We are seeing a proposed increase of $50 million for basic education funding that would go to all 500 school districts and $50 million for all 500 school districts for special education funding. As you can see with these very small percentage increases, that does not allow school districts to keep up with inflation. So for school districts that have small adequacy supplements or school districts that have no adequacy supplements, many of them with the inflation that we're seeing, as all of you here understand, and the increases in prices that we're seeing for everything, think about gas in school buses and what that means for that. Think about food in school cafeterias and what that means for school budgets. They are going to find, if this is the only money that they get, that they are going to really start to fall behind, which is where we get the cyber charter funding reforms, because it is important both to make sure we are investing new dollars into our public schools. It is also important to make sure that that the dollars that are being invested in public education are being spent wisely and they are being spent on educating kids. I think it's a very well understood idea that cyber charter schools in Pennsylvania, which receive a tuition payment for each student who leaves a school district to go to a cyber charter school, they have been traditionally paid the same amount as a brick and mortar charter school, even though they don't have the same costs as brick and mortar schools. They educate kids at home on a computer. So for the past 2 years, the legislature has worked on adjusting the tuition rates that school districts pay to try to get the amount that we're paying more in line with what it actually costs to educate students in a cyber charter school. And so there are just two little kind of wonky details, or wonky policy proposals to be able to save $75 million to make sure that we are starting to really align the tuition payments with the cost. So there's like an excess spending factor that effectively caps a school district's cyber tuition at the median. So there are school districts that will not be spending, $35,000 for a regular education student to go to cyber charter schools. And then it expands permitted deductions because if if cyber charter schools don't have any tax assessment costs, then they shouldn't be getting a share of the school district's tax assessment expenditures. So these would save $75 million and bring the amount of money that school districts save up to $250 million. That is a way of getting dollars into school districts that need them the most without having to constantly raise new revenue. And if anybody wants to talk more about waste, fraud, and abuse in cyber charter schools and/or like cyber charter school enrollment, like we've seen many small cyber charter schools are just hemorrhaging enrollment, and so they're experiencing financial difficulties because they're losing students. Meanwhile, the largest cyber charter school in the state ended up with $114 million more in revenue this year than they anticipated because they enrolled 5,000 students more than they thought they would enroll. So it's a system that is like in flux and very, there's just a lot of money in there that is like not being really spent particularly well. So I think we need to make sure that those cyber charter reforms get put into this budget so that all school districts will end up with enough money, because the money that they save is the same as getting new dollars from the state. So I'm done with now.
Thank you so much, Susan. And if folks have questions on school funding, please put those in the chat. We'll get to those for Susan in just a second. I'm going to go quickly to Connor here to talk a little bit about transit and transportation funding. Connor.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Give me just one second to get my slides up. Oop, if it'll let me, hold on. Here. All right. Yes. Okay, cool. Sorry. I was not hearing affirmation, but yeah, thanks so much for letting me be a part of this today. My name's Connor Descheemaker. I'm the statewide campaign manager for Transit for All PA. We are a movement of about 45,000 transit riders and transit workers in all 253 legislative districts across Pennsylvania, fighting for full funding for public transportation. And after last year's budget sort of fiasco, reformulate and sits throughout my presentation today. So one of the big things I'm really proudest of right now, I've talked to this group about it before, or similar groups to this, excuse me, about it before, is our fellowship cohort. We realized we had both a narrative problem and a funding problem last. We're doing base building work. Right now, that means 3 organizing fellows each in the Lehigh Valley and in Lancaster. And then starting in end of August, early September, we'll be doing the same in both Luzerne and Lackawanna counties. And then in 27, doing the same in Westmoreland County.
Hey, Connor, you're cutting in and
We're here
out a
because
little
transit
bit. I think there might be rough service. If you turn off your video while you're presenting, it might help us. Sorry. I just want to make sure we can hear everything.
No, thank you for that heads up. Thank you for that heads up. All right. So yeah, yes, transit cuts anywhere are a threat to freedom of mobility everywhere. So in terms of our context, last year's quote unquote solution was just basically saying, here, SEPTA and PRT, you can have less money for safety and accessibility, and you can use that to shore up service to make us look good on the world stage. But the consequence downstream means that, as one example, SEPTA has $10 billion in state of good repair deficit. And for those that have been paying attention for a while, they had last year given for how much they need to just make their systems be adequate. And for the rest of Pennsylvania, no other transit agencies have these same tools at their disposal. And in FY28, those capital funds for the rest authority, so replacing buses, fixing maintenance yards, those sorts of things, that money becomes overcommitted So saying, oh, we'll just give more flexibility is not a solution. Alone, Lanta in the Lehigh Valley cut service 3 times, and we're in a position where Red Rose Transit in Lancaster is proposing to raise their access fares for shared ride and paratransit. So the people who are most transit and often also most cost burdened are going to be facing the brunt of these funding. And another thing I'll elaborate on in a second is our shared ride and paratransit structural deficit. That's the education here in our state budget advocacy. That transit only matters in urban areas, and that SEPTA were used as shorthand for our crisis, exacerbating that urban divide. We're in a position, and this year we have highlighted that on education about what transit looks in the other 61 counties, saying that there is no solution to NPRT and vice versa. The small fix.
Connor, I hate to interrupt, but we're losing like several seconds of what you're saying at a time here. So I think we may need to send this PowerPoint out with follow-up notes from this meeting, because I'm not sure folks are understanding what you're saying at this point. My apologies.
I'm very sorry, y'all. I've had computer issues the last 2 weeks, and I don't know what's wrong. I appreciate your patience
Absolutely,
with me.
Connor.
Should I speak, or should I just...
If you want to offer a few kind of wrapping up thoughts here, we'll get to some questions then and we'll take. Or maybe we've just lost you.
Can we hear you, Connor?
Yeah, I am not sure what's going on with my computer, just the last on video.
Why don't you work on that? I'm going to start posing a few questions here because we are getting close to the end of our time. So a couple questions related to minimum wage. So I know Senator Haywood was going to try to stay here with us. A question for Senator Haywood about minimum wage from Sean. I often hear critics of minimum wage say it is a training wage and that hardly anyone makes less than $15 an hour. How many adults in PA make $15 an hour, make less than $15 an hour?
So thank you for that question. I've received reports between 400 and 700,000 individuals making less than $15 an hour. And I would also share with you, if you go to any fast food place between 9 and 3 p.m., they're not going to be teenagers there. The teenagers are going to be in school. Who's going to be working there are adults. And all the surveys show that most of the people who are making at or near minimum wage are women who are adults.
Thank you so much for that answer, Senator Haywood. A follow-up about minimum wage. This one's a little bit more specific. This is from our friend Jeff with the State Independent Living Council. Will there be an increase in appropriations funds to fund a minimum wage increase that would, for home care workers and individuals with disabilities employed through OVR making less than $15 an hour currently?
Thank you. As I shared earlier, the last time Pennsylvania raised the minimum wage, the state legislature and the governor included raises for all of the social service organizations that were dependent upon state funding, including what you have just described, but beyond. And so the General Assembly is well aware of the impact on raising the minimum wage, and in the past has consistently raised funding for organizations in order to compensate for the increase, even as I described, having a tax credit for businesses so that they can be able to absorb the increase.
Thank you, Senator Haywood. We're going to go to some education-related questions now. And Susan, feel free to chime in on this one. One of the questions is, are we hearing any indicators that opting into the federal school voucher plan is a trade that is on the table? And our friend Samantha says, I hope not.
I'm not on the inside of the building, but I have not heard that. I have heard very consistently from Governor Shapiro that he is going to wait until the federal rules are out so that he can understand how this program would actually work and then evaluate what that impact would be on Pennsylvania. So I could be wrong, but I would have a hard time believing that Governor Shapiro would opt into this program with absolutely no idea of how it's going to work. Treasury held a little behind closed door preview that last week, and all it did was just open up all these cans of worms that made it even more difficult to understand how this program would actually work and how we would be able to both protect tax dollars from just getting shunted into places where they don't belong, and or how we could protect students from even more discrimination with the use of these tax dollars by private schools that really do, as we know, we did a whole report on it, discriminate against students for basically any and all reasons that you could ever imagine.
Thank you, Susan. It's somewhat reassuring to hear that that's not at least something that we're hearing discussed as a possibility. Hopefully we can prevent this from happening. Another minimum wage question or two for you, Senator Haywood. One is Freda from Northwestern Pennsylvania says our Republican Senator, Dan Laughlin, has previously said he supports graduated raise in increase of minimum wage. How should we advocate with him?
We need champions in the Republican caucus of senators. We need champions. And so what we will need is for Dan and any other Republicans who say they're for raise minimum wage to be a champion. Being a champion means going to leadership and saying, to get my vote on the rest of this budget, we need to see a raise in the minimum wage. So we don't need just votes, although we do need the votes. We need champions.
Thanks, Senator Haywood. Speaking of champions, you have been a real champion for something that we have been talking about for a long time here at PA Policy Center, which is a fair share tax plan. So Sean has a question. How much revenue would the fair share tax plan raise, and what is its status?
Thank you so much for that question. I was in a fantastic conversation with advocates from across the United States trying to tax the rich so that we can pay for what we need. As we know, corporations have received unbelievable tax breaks from the national government and many from the state government as well, including no severance tax on natural gas. We have the Saudi Arabia of gas, yet there are no tax on drillers. There's no taxes on wealth. Now, we have a challenge in Pennsylvania because we have a uniformity clause which says all taxes have to be at the same level. All income taxes have to be at the same level. So we can't do progressive taxation like many states, but we can tax different kinds of wealth transactions. So my proposal is for a tax on capital gains. That's not income. A tax on dividends. That's not income. A tax on royalties. That's not income. At a higher rate. And also the proposal includes a small tax reduction for everyday people earning money. Current status. We have reintroduced, we got some more co-sponsors. We added some folks who are in support of the legislation. However, we're going to need, in order to get this done, a new General Assembly with leadership from the House, the Senate, and the governor. We need a trifecta in Pennsylvania. Right now, the Senate still controls that Senate caucus. If we can get the trifecta, the House, the Senate, the governor, that is our best shot at increasing the taxations on those who can afford it. Let me say finally, please, I've worked with a group called Patriotic Millionaires since 2017. Patriotic Millionaires are folks like Abigail Disney, part of the Disney group, and many others. They have been consistent supporters of this fair share tax plan, taxing the wealthy. They know that tax is right. So with your support, we can continue the momentum.
Thank you, Senator Haywood, for being such a champion on this. Looking at the time here, and I felt like that was a really good one to wrap up with you because you have been such a champion for the Fair Share Tax Plan. I would like to go to Susan and then to Connor for any final thoughts you have on the state budget and what folks can be doing right now in the weeks ahead. Susan.
Yep. So the adequacy money is not just money. These are the dollars that are invested to increase opportunities for children. And so we know that there are kids who can do career tech education now that never would have been able to do it. We know there are thousands and thousands of little kids who are getting reading instruction and have help in their classrooms who otherwise would be sitting by themselves in the corner of the room, never learning to read and being left behind. And so if you have senators, I just think it is really worth it to just thank them. If they voted for the adequacy funding last year, is to thank them, both Democrats and Republicans. It's hard to get this much money to go into the same pot year after year, but it is the most important thing that we can do in Pennsylvania is making sure our youngest and our oldest kids in K through 12 are setting themselves up to be able to have successful, productive lives to help all of us as we get older. We're going to need all of them to be able to come in and kind of take everything over. So that's my pitch.
Thank you, Susan. Connor, your thoughts?
I'll try my best. The most important takeaway for us is to push for a new way of funding shared ride and paratransit in Pennsylvania. We have an organizational sign-on letter that I put in the chat. This is the best way for us to put pressure and educate. This year, our tone has so that next year we have a group of folks who understand that transit affects their community and is not just something that they can shunt off as part of the manufactured rural-urban divide. We'll also have a campaign relaunch on Monday related to the Supreme Court ruling, which last year specific folks repeatedly said that a resolution on transit funding was tied to a resolution on skill games. And we need more and more dedicated money than what the government.
Thank you, Connor. Let me just wrap up here by saying thank you so much to all of our panelists today. Chairman Harris had to depart earlier. He is definitely in demand in his role. We appreciated his time here. Thank you so much to Senator Haywood for being with us here the whole time and for just being you, Senator. Thank you also to Susan and Connor for your leadership and advocacy efforts that make such a difference to all of us here in Pennsylvania. We will be back 3 weeks from today for another policy action meeting. We'll be focusing on federal issues. That will be on Thursday, July 9th. Typically, we do them on the first Thursday, but it's so close to the Independence Day holiday, we're going to later. So join us then. I think we'll have a link here in the chat for folks if you want to start registering for that now. Thank you to all of my colleagues at the Pennsylvania Policy Center for your help here in this, especially our Executive Director, Phyllis D. Williams. Thanks also to Kirsten, Adrian, Dwayne, Laura, and Caston, and Susan as the part of the Penn Policy Center team. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day and have a wonderful observance of the Juneteenth holiday. What an accomplishment in this country.